Here.
Everybody can rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First, we have public participation and recognition, acceptance of gifts and donations, and this is an action item. That the Board of Education accept with gratitude the donation of $674.52 from the Dekalb Visions for Learning Educator Grant awarded to Lincoln Elementary first grade teachers Kate Cardella and Danielle Davis to use towards the purchase of flexible classroom seating to help support their students' social and academic needs. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Jeff Albrecht,
Yes.
Carrie Malak,
Yes.
Victoria Newport,
Yes.
Valerie Pena Hernandez,
Yes.
Chris Smith,
Yes.
Howard Song.
Yes.
And is anybody here from Echo Labs tonight, or is Kate here, or? Okay. But thank you to Echo Labs for the very generous donation.
Thank you.
Next, we have public comment. Members of the public who wish to speak to the board should complete a request card prior to the meeting. This section of the meeting will be reserved for comments from the public. All comments should be limited to 3 minutes. Criticism of individuals is not. Next slide, please.
Except if they're on the same time.
Oh, this was So we're going to start tonight with Tangi Smith, student residency.
Tangi. Good evening, school board, and to my fellow parents and Dekalb residents. I'm just getting up here to say something really quick and short and sweet because I had a small conversation after our last meeting with one of the school board members who tried to inform me that under no circumstance could a student be a resident of our district and not live in the same household with their parents. And if so, that student was doing so illegally and should be charged out-of-state tuition, out-of-district tuition. So as part of a school district that wants to be known for protecting the rights of its children who are residents within school district 428, we have a duty to seek out and find the truth. And the truth is that Illinois State Board of Education website, better known as ISB.net, points out, quote, existing law guarantees immigrant and non-English speaking students a free public education from kindergarten through grade 12 up until the age of 21, regardless of immigrant status. Additional, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that undocumented children have the same right as U.S. citizens and permanent residents to receive free and public education. And the truth is that, quote, among immigrant and non-English speaking families, it is not uncommon to find that children do not live in the same household as their parents. To safeguard immigrant students' rights to a free public education, LEAs must not conclude that children who live within the district but apart from their parents must be charged tuition as if they were non-residents. And lastly, truth is, the ISB.net states, quote, even when it's undisputed that a child resides in the district, but questionable whether the child lives apart from the parent, simply to access educational programs, districts must not apply inflexible rules to determine residency. Districts cannot mandate adult caretakers or relatives with whom a child lives to establish legal guardianship as a condition for gaining access to the district schools. Districts may require reasonable assurance from the responsible adult caretakers that they accept responsibility for the child, and this may be done through a notarized affidavit. That we have a duty to seek and find the truth so that we know the truth, and the truth will set us free from ignorance.
We have Colette Maher.
And I have some handouts if you would be so kind as to
share them with the board, and I brought some, if you could sternly share. I like to wait until everyone has one because I'm going to encourage you to use this as I speak. But again, my name is Claude Meyer. I'm a resident of Dekalb, and I oppose hiring the national investigations. So again, as you get those handouts, please feel free to take a look at the facts and figures presented. I see this as an economic issue that needs to be addressed because there seems to be a concern of wasting resources. So let's kind of go over some facts and figures. In 2016, District 428 received $30,495 in funding from state and federal sources, which uses student enrollment to determine those funds. So those funds are based on student enrollment. Last year, there were 6,450 enrolled students, which equates to $4,716 per student enrolled of that additional funding from state and federal resources. Now let's talk about national investigation. They reported they typically find anywhere from 2 to 4% of students who are out of district. So for the sake of this discussion, let's round it up to 5%. That actually equates to 322 students. So if you take that 322 students that you assume to be out of district times 4,716, that figure represents $1,552,000. So that means we lose $1,518,552 annually. Now you add the $35,000 to $40,000 you want to pay national investigators, the investigation, and you add on potential lawsuit, legal fees to defend your action. And I don't see how 322 students across all the schools, all the grades, are going to provide you any cost savings in regards to reduction of classrooms, reduction of teachers, reduction of assets. So let me point out another statistic. Based on the last 5 years of data, student mobility, that's your percentage of students that moved in and out of district, that's actually gone down. It's been 13% and it's recently dropped to 12%. So that mobility figure of students, the decrease, that doesn't seem to me to justify the need to hire national investigation at a cost of $35,000 to $40,000 and disrupt people in this community. So let me end with, and if you don't mind, Mr. Hallgren, if I could borrow a quote from you. How does this represent the oath each of you took to respect taxpayer interests as a faithful protector of the school district assets? So again, I stand here before you pleading, do not do this. Save our money. Thank you.
Bravo.
David Barrow.
Yes, David Bear. I'm a resident of Dekalb, and I was at the last meeting, and I said at that time that I was on the referendum committee that helped build the new high school. Neither of my children were in high school at that time. In fact, they both graduated, gone on to college. They were out of the district. My efforts were not directed at cost efficiencies. If they were, I would have voted against the referendum. I didn't have children in the school district. So my efforts were directed toward all children. And I'd just like to say that when we talk about representing the interests of the taxpayers, I'm one taxpayer whose interest is not in ferreting out students in order to keep them from attending our schools. I'm very pleased that we're a place that students want to attend our schools. I hope they can get a good education here, and that's any child that's looking for a good education. I've met some of the children that I think are being scrutinized, and I have found them to be children interested in education just like other children. And I hope they can get it here, and I hope they can get it here without interference. Thank you.
Next we have Kay Hanlon and she wants to speak about student residency. Is Kay here?
Harnett?
Harnan, sorry.
Oh, how quickly you forget.
I don't know, it looks like an L on the end.
I wrote it quickly. Hi, my name's Kay Harnett, and I always try to speak positively when I speak before the community about issues, especially issues that affect children. And I think our primary concern here are children. And I wanted to say something about expectations from an elected Board of Education. You're the leaders in our community with regard to the well-being of children. And I'm concerned that sometimes when those of us speak about the well-being of children, we're portrayed as those who are not responsible to the taxpayers or not considering the taxes that folks have to pay. And anybody who knows anything who runs an organization about the well-being of the recipient, i.e. in this case children, nothing happens without the budget. And you want to be responsible about the budget so that you can be responsible to the taxpayers and to the children. So when I think about a board, I guess I'm concerned that you brought that issue to us without the kind of thoughtful planning that I would have liked to have seen and clear definition of a problem. I think many people were made uncomfortable and it encouraged divisiveness as opposed to cohesion in the community. And I think I would hope that you would consider that as you move forward to provide visionary leadership that is thoughtful, that is kind and inclusive and respective of the taxpayer's dollar. And in doing that, we'll respect the children and we can respect both. We don't have to divide between one or the other. And I thank you for the opportunity.
Next we have Andre Williams.
Y'all come up with me. Good evening, everyone. My name is Andre Williams. I'm a 7th Precinct Community Person. And I'm going to speak strictly from a fiscal perspective about Dekalb CUSD 428 using National Investigations, Inc. Let's say you vote to hire National Investigations, Inc., and they discover about 5% of the students are out of district. So you cut the said 5%, which is about 1 student per classroom per school. By cutting the 1 student, you can't cut a teacher. Heat the room any less, close a building, or reduce an overhead whatsoever. So essentially no expense reduction. However, you do lose about $5,000 to $6,000 in state aid, and you pay to investigate to eject the student. So bottom line, unless you can hit the 30 to 50% mark and ejecting kids from the district, this initiative costs the district a lot of money. I would also like to add that last year, when my children, these two, were starting at Lincoln, they had air conditioning issues. And it's just ironic that the new school year is coming up, and the first thing they're thinking about doing is undereducating some children, as opposed to having them learn in a comfortable setting. Not only that, but also the audacity to hire someone who knows nothing about this community, nothing about the children in this community. Here it is, we meet people and we see each other publicly when we go places. And sometimes we have our children with us and sometimes we don't. I don't want my children to have to look up at someone and have a disgusted look on their face about a teacher, principal, school board member, or anything of that nature. Because I want them cognitive of what's going on. And this is the last thing I want to say. What about using this budget to get history taught in these elementary schools? That's it.
participated in public comment tonight. Next, we have board committee reports and correspondence. Is anybody?
I'd just like to report on the hunger simulation that was conducted at Huntley. I participated in it. I found myself really taken aback by the difficulties that a person, and for some reason or other, whoever organized this have given me the role of being a student, and different aspects of life all come together to make it extremely difficult for somebody in a student's position to affect change and to get through life and still get educated. I learned a lot through the simulation. I'm glad we had it. I'd really like to see it out to the public sometime.
Thank you, Helen. I just want to say what a great back-to-school nights we had. Well-attended. Kids were extremely excited. A lot of parents there. So that was really nice to see. We had some curriculum nights also, very well attended, and a lot of excitement with the kids coming in and out. And so I have to say, I was very impressed with Brooks. I was there for when their kindergartners all came. Not one kid cried, but there sure were a lot of parents shedding tears there. So there was a great turnout, and I know we have some ice cream socials and some other things coming up. All board members that can get out to the schools. It's a great thing to see happening. Yeah, okay. I also have that we're having the Dekalb Education Foundation's Boot Scoot and Bowling is it's their 30th celebration. It's a dinner and dance on September 30th, and it's at Veranda's Banquet Center. There's a dinner at cocktails at 6, dinner at 7. The Party Doctors will be playing. There's a silent auction and a drawdown. And the Dekalb Education Foundation is really a great foundation that really supports our schools. Last year, I believe they gave $45,000 back to the school in grants, and so anybody who can come out and support DEF on the 30th, it would be great to see people there. I said one more thing. And the last thing I have is we have our first FFAC meeting September 14th. Cindy and I are putting together a charge to the FFAC on what we would like them to look at this year. It's quite a lengthy list that we put together this morning, but we're really going to use the goals that we developed in our retreat and the priorities in order to get those goals put together in that charge to the FFAC. So we'll send that out to the board prior to the 14th. So.
No, I just want to comment on the Clinton Rosette Middle School. I don't know if Mr. Vincent is here or not. It's in the hall, all right. Good, I wouldn't tell him good job if he was here. I just went in, and my general comment is, it's like all the other schools. You know, my kid was in Clinton Rosette, and I went to the school. Not only was it clean and all the things that we take for granted all the time, but I just, you know what, it's a good reminder that there's so many really great people that we have in our district. You forget a lot of these things, but you know, I looking out at the audience here, I wasn't here when we had our last meeting. It was up and down and everywhere, and I'm not going to say whether, you know, I was certainly, you know, happy to take questions or anything after. I'm not going to say whether I agree or disagree with anybody here. But what I will say is that, right, wrong, or indifferent, the fact that everybody's taking their time to come here and share their opinions and talk with us is a welcome sight. We deal with a lot of issues that, you know, aren't necessarily popular, really aren't fun. And honestly, the best thing that we can do is have the community, which is represented by whoever is here, guide us through the process. Okay, so I guess what I'm saying is I welcome everyone's input, and I encourage you to attend these meetings as we go forward.
Thanks, Rick.
I just want to echo what you said, Victoria, about the opening night ceremonies and so on. I got to Malta and to Lincoln, and you know, there's just never enough time you want to spend the whole night there, but you can't when you have a board meeting that same evening or other activities. But anyway, it looked great at Malta. I was leaving there as they were starting to get busy. And then I got to Lincoln and got to spend a little time there, and they were right in the midst of everything. It smelled some really good food coming out of the food prep area back there. Got to talk to a number of teachers, but of course they're busy talking to the students and parents. So, you know, it's a good time just to get to see what's happening in the beginning of things. Talk a little bit about air conditioning at Lincoln. We'd like to see that get fixed. Anyway, it was a good night.
Yeah, and I as well, I think we all agree they were amazing turnouts. I mean, every single back to school night that we attended, the curriculum nights, the honors night award ceremony, Mr. Vincent hosting the rule of school, everything. I mean, Little John, I promised Little John PTA that I would, commend them on their amazing work. They wrapped 3 moms wrapped 500 hot dogs. I mean, if that's not dedication, then I really don't know what is. It's just all schools all around are doing some pretty amazing things. And I think that we as a community right now, I am so excited that we're all here. I mean, we're all at the best of democracy right now, just trying to get our voices heard and making sure that everyone in the community is represented. And, it ties back to the schools. I think our administration, our staff, and our students feel that support from our community. And we certainly want the community to feel that support from the board as well. So thank you for being here.
Okay, next we have presentations, bond restructuring, Miss Elizabeth Hennessy, Raymond James and Associates, Inc., and Miss Adrian Booker, Ellis.
Before we get things going here, just want to introduce Liz Hennessy. I know you've seen her here several times before, and then Adrian Booker from Powers and her associate John Clemente. The bond restructuring plan has been in the making for a lot of years, honestly. Ever since we issued the bonds, we've looked forward as to what happened in the economic times that we had, the record EAB. So we've always been kind of researching and looking and being up to date in terms of the bond restructuring. FFAC has been involved tremendously in that project as well. And we're at that point where it's time to take care of these bonds and to get them restructured. We did back in December restructure a portion of them through a partial advance refunding and private placement, which was successful, and it did save the taxpayers about $1 million over the life of those bonds. So now it's time to restructure that first piece of the bonds that we did back in 2008. So here Liz is going to present the updated numbers and what those look like, and then also Adrian Booker's role in the process as well as our municipal financial advisor. So, thank you.
Thanks for having us. The presentation we have tonight is on the back screen for the audience. But I'm going to go again kind of through the history, back from the issue of the bonds up to now. The first restructuring we did last year, 2016, the plans for 2017, 2018, and 2019. And our so the market update is first, and got some graphs here. The blue bars are the highest interest rates have been since '93 in years 1 through 30, and the dark black line is the average, and the red line is where we are now. So what this graph basically says is interest rates are still very low. And the exciting news this week, it's never not good news for our economy or for our world in terms of global instability with the events of North Korea, for the weekend, the local economic event, the national economic event with the release of the unemployment did not come out so great last Friday. And all those negative factors have created a very low interest rate bond market. And in fact, the 10-year Treasury hit the lowest rate ever this past week in the year of 2017. So for this year, we are at all-time lows, and we've got some of those low rates on the bottom here. This chart doesn't reflect the events of last week. If we go to the next page, we've got the change in the yield curve. And just looking at some points in history, if you look on the graph on the left side of the page, this is the AAA Municipal Market Data Index. So this reflects municipal bond rates, which are the type of debt you issue. And that blue line is the rates in 2007. And then the yellow line is a spike of the yields during the height of the credit crisis in 2008. The black line, or the grayish line at the bottom is the 2012, the record low rates. And you've got the bluish bar and the black bar that are kind of on top of each other there. That's a year ago and this year in terms of yield. So rates are very similar to what they were last year. We've had short-term rates come up a bit with the Fed Reserve rate increases, but again, really good time to borrow. And then the next page is just a 30-year or history back from January of 2001. So you can see the highs and the lows of interest rates for 10, 20, and 30 years. And just some notable things. We had a very low point last summer when we had the Brexit. That was in June, July, when Great Britain decided to leave the European Union. Then we had a super high spike right after the election of President Trump. It was unexpected, and the markets expected higher CPIs, higher inflation, higher GDP. Because none of that has really gotten done yet, the market is kind of back into the same mode we were a year ago, which is good because it's low rates for you and issuers of municipal debt. Let's go on to the district's debt. And we've got your different bond issues here, all of them relating to the $108 million referendum from 2008. So if we start on the far right-hand side, we've got those 2008 bonds, then 2009, 10, 11, 11 A, B, C. Those were placed with local banks. And then we've got the Series 16, which was the first portion of the refunding of the 2008s, which was purely for savings. And as Cindy mentioned, that saved the taxpayers over $1 million. So the gray highlighted portions of those bond maturity amounts reflect callability. That means those bonds can be refunded at the call date. Municipal bonds, unlike a mortgage, cannot be refunded any time. You can't just redo your bonds like you redo your mortgage. Typically, investors require a 9 to 10 year non-callable period, so they can at least earn the money that they, the interest on the bonds that they purchased for that amount of time. So very intentionally, these bonds all have call dates here coming up 2017, 18, and 19. And we'll get into that in a minute, how that helps you as you face some restructuring. So let's go to the next page. The yellow column is your current debt service levies. And you notice for 2014, 4.7, 4.7, 4.7 million is the annual payment. And that was very intentionally so. We kept those payments at 4.7 million for the first 10 years of the bonds. Why? Because when we got into the issuance of the bonds, we saw what was happening to values in the district. The EAV over those 10 years went down almost 30%. And that is not unlike the rest of the nation in the heart of the recession. So because we knew that was happening at the time of the issuance of the bonds, we said, let's keep those payments low to the people right now and hope that things change. And if they don't change, we have the option in year 10 in 2017 to restructure the bonds, refund those payments, just like your mortgage, perhaps go from a 15-year payback to a 20-year payback to make those annual payments lower for you. So that's where we are today. We also have on the far right-hand side of that column the impact on a $150,000 home, which you're paying for bonds is about $334 of your tax bill. If your market value home is about $150,000. Okay, so let's go to the next page. So here we see what's happening in 2017 and thereafter. The bond payments increase steadily, and then they're totally repaid by 2028. That's the current debt structure. But now we have the opportunity to refund this, and we'll go into some of those options. Page 11 puts into perspective that $344 paid by the $150,000 home in your tax bill. The green bars on the top represent the part of your tax bill, your total tax bill, that go for District 428 bonds, okay? The pink bars are the operating portion for District 428. You see the bars that are blue for the county. There's a teal for the city. We've got the Forest Preserve, the Dekalb Library, the Park District, various townships and roads, and the purple is Kishwaukee College. So this gives you an idea, gives you a perspective on when you pay your tax bill, what portions go to what different taxing bodies in the area, depending on where you live. This is for a City of DeKalb resident. But I wanted to kind of put the green bars in perspective for you. That's part of the bill that it represents the bonds. So just a commentary going back to 2007. If we go back and look at the historical growth rate and the equalized assessed valuation, the 3-year average in 2007 was 10.8%. That's how quick this area was growing. The 5-year average was 8.44%, and the 10-year average was 7.37%. So at the time of the issuance of the bonds, we expected the EAV to continue to increase, but working with the district and the assessor's office, conservatively estimated between a 5% growth rate and a 6.86% growth rate. During this time, we worked with what I know is now your FFAC, used to be the CFAC committee, to review the financing plan for each bond, because when we saw the recession hitting, we decided we've got to talk to the community, figure out what's going on, how long do you think this is going to last? Of course, nobody knew at the time, but we said, look, if we issue the bonds closer to the time the district needs to spend the money, we're going to save them interest cost. The only danger of doing that is that rates are going to go up, but interest rates were not going up. Interest rates continue to come down over that period of time. During that period of time, due to the district's really good financial stewardship and control on expenditures and building their fund balances, they had an upgraded rating to AA- in 2009, which saved the district $8 million over the life of those bonds. So that was excellent, and right now you maintain that rating and a AA2 from Moody's. Strong AA ratings. So the other things we did during that time of issuing the bonds was take advantage of the different options that there were to save money, and one of those was called Build America bonds. And those are the bonds that came out in 2009 pursuant to the American Recovery and Reconstruction Act that allowed the district to recoup 35% of the interest costs from the federal government. So that was another option we took advantage of at the time. Go to the next page. I want to just do one more historical point here for you. As we realized the EAVs were continuing to go down, we said, well, gee, we're locked in by statute to a repayment schedule that's 20 years. That's the longest you can pay back bonds, even though your high school is going to last for 40, 50 plus years. So we went ahead and met with your local representatives here in DeKalb with the district administration and asked them to support some legislation that would allow the district to pay the bonds back over 25 years instead of 20 years. After much discussion, they decided that they were not able to do that and didn't feel comfortable pursuing legislation along those lines because it wasn't discussed prior to the referendum. That was what they told us. So at any rate, that did not happen. So what we have are these call features, this 10-year call that allows us to restructure the bonds, again, like going from a 15-year to a 20-year mortgage. So let's go to the next section and we'll give you the refunding update so far. But first on page 15, we want to talk about assumptions. Each time we do this presentation, each time we meet with FFAC, each time we look at all this, we kick the tires with regard to what's happening with the district's tax base. District administration has conversations with the assessor, and the most recent information tells us that the district had a reassessment of existing properties up 7% in levy year 16. Going forward, to be conservative, we assumed only 1% on reassessment going forward, and that's reflected on the value of the home on the far right side. You see the $150,000 home going up at 1% a year. Next, we look at new property, because new property is the thing that offsets the taxes for the existing tax base. And back before the recession, there were all these developments planned, as you know, that did not end up being developed, given the tough economy that pursued. The other thing, the TIF districts in the city of DeKalb will, when they expire, they will become new property to the district. So they will soak up some of the tax burden, making it lower for existing residents. So we've had numerous conversations with the city of DeKalb and have confirmed that the years that TIP 2 expires is levy year 2019, and TIP 1 will expire in levy year 22. So under the new property column, you can see those big jumps in the EAV when those TIPs expire, and that property comes back available to be taxed by not only District 428, but all the other taxing bodies in the area as well.
I have a question.
Sure.
When discussing them, did you take up the discussion of them not engaging in a new tip? I mean, did they make any kind of statements about creating new tips? Because if they do, that would negate that particular assumption. Do they?
Well, new tips would mean whatever EAV is existing here would be frozen at its current level. So if they then use the property taxes to redevelop that and have growth, that growth you would not receive, but it wouldn't take away from where you are currently.
From the assumption that you're making when those tips come offline, did you say 19 and 22 or something like that?
Yes, that's right.
So then that factor won't be negated by a new tip.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Good question.
I appreciate it.
So those are the different assumptions that make up our scenario here. And to be conservative on those tips even further, we did not assume any growth in tip 1 or tip 2 above the current level. So what we see on the far right-hand side of the page is the current debt payments on the home and then the projected under these assumptions. And so right now, as those payments go up, as you saw on the graph, the payments for the home go from about $311 up to about $875 if we do no refunding or restructuring. So
That would be for that $150,000 home.
that's correct.
Okay.
So the refunding options for the remaining callable bonds, we're coming up on a call date for the Series 2008 bonds, and that's January 1 of 2018. So we're looking at two options tonight. One is to go ahead and refund all those bonds in October 2017 versus refund about 8.5 million of them in October of 2017 and the remaining 8.5 million in January of 18. So very close. And the reason we would do that is because whenever you sell less than 10 million bonds in a calendar year, your bonds can be issued as bank qualified. So bank qualified means that bank purchasers of those bonds receive a federal income tax break. And they pass that on to the district, the issuing district, in the form of lower interest rates. They can range anywhere from 5.05% to 0.2%. So what it means to you is lower interest rates. So that's why we're suggesting that might be a real good option to pursue, and we've quantified it for you here in this presentation tonight. So if we go to the next page, let me just, and I apologize for all the numbers on this page, and I know they're small, but let me just try to hit the highlights for you. Under the kind of orangish column that says December 2016 refunding, that's the refunding for savings that saved $1 million. So that's done. Now we're looking at the proposed October 2017 refunding. And the reason that works well with that January 1 call date is because you're able to refund those bonds within 90 days of that call date. So that's why we're suggesting going now, so we can make sure we hit that call date at its earliest point. The 2017 refunding is not a refunding for saving money. We're moving bonds out. Okay, so moving bonds from the next 11 years out another 10 or 11 years, so that the total plan takes your debt out, another 9 years. So that refunding has actually present value savings of $118,000 to it, but total debt service over the life of the bonds is more expensive because we're moving bonds from the next 10-year period to the following 10-year period. We're going out longer term. So over time, that's additional cost of $6.2 million. Then we come back with the 2019 refunding, which could be done in December or January. And this is a big one, so this could be done in pieces too, but this has got savings in it. And this is going to generate positive savings, PV, present value of $5.6 million, but cost to taxpayers, again, an additional $13 million over the life of the bonds. In that 2019 bond issue, to be conservative, we've added 1% interest rate cushion because we want to make sure that this is all doable, even if interest rates go up. Every year, we've been waiting for interest rates to go up. They don't seem to do that. So we hope that will continue to be the case through 2019. So the middle column, the blue one, is doing the 2017 refunding all at once, about $17 million, versus option 2, doing that in 2 pieces. Okay, so the net PV savings on the 2 together is about $48,000, and the cost over time is $5.8 million. So it's less costly by doing those 2 pieces. Why? Because we're getting lower interest rates because of bank qualification, and waiting another couple months to do that refunding saves you a little interest cost on the time factor. So,
I have a quick question.
sure.
Are you in that 500 to 800 or 300 to 800 raising the individual 150,000? Is that option 1? I mean, was that making the assumption for option 1? That, I mean, in other words, the raising of individual per $150,000 unit, is that what you're making the assumption that that amount, raising that amount on the option the first option that you gave us, is that raising it $500?
Good question. Let's go back to option 1.
Sorry,
No, that's okay. And again,
I just want to make what your assumption is attaching it to a home,
Yeah, let's focus on those last 2 columns on the right.
right?
So if the second column from the right is the same thing we just saw, where we're going from $311 up to a maximum of $875. That's a current payment without doing anything.
Right.
With this plan, with this 3-step plan, including the 2019 plan, we get the new debt payment for the $150,000 home under the green box. And on that, it flattens the payment. Instead of going up to, $875, the highest point there is only $485. So this is the refunding.
That's a significant reduction.
It's significant, yes.
So now, am I understanding that that's using the 5.8 million? Is that using the second?
Well, that's option 1. If we use option 2, which is a little bit lower cost, the numbers are on the home are not that much different.
Okay.
Because, we're moving the whole tax rate very little in terms of real dollars over that period of time. But you can see the effect is the same, going from 311 on page 18 up to like 485 as a max. So the good news is this takes your payment, the peak of those payments off and flattens your payments, but you have to make those payments for a longer period of time.
Right.
That's the trade-off.
Right.
And I think the graphic shows really well on page 19. So the top is the graphic of the payments without the restructuring, and that ends in 2028. And the bottom is with the restructuring, and this is not only 2017 and 18, but it's 2019 as well. So this is the three-phase restructuring. Our debt goes out now to 2038 levy year instead of 2028, but you can see how much lower those payments are for the homeowner. So if we look at page 20, we look at the comparison of the BQ versus non-BQ. And the present value savings on option 1, where the present value savings is 118,000 versus 48,000, but the total cost over the life of the bonds is 367,000 lower. So that has to do with the lower interest costs of those two bonds and the bank qualified benefit. So we suggest that you look at doing the two-piece option. When you do two bond issues, you have additional costs to pay, but those costs are all included in the total cost issue. So that's our recommendation. Adrian's going to talk a little bit about her role as financial advisor and looking over all these options with us. And then I'll come back and talk a little bit about financing schedule and certainly answer questions that you may have.
Okay, good evening. Just in looking at, I'm not going to take too much of your time. You have the packets, you have the PowerPoint in your packets, but I'm going to follow to page 2, where in terms of Ellers and Associates, we are an independent municipal advisory firm, have been established well over 50 years. Our head office is in Roseville, Minnesota, right outside of Minneapolis, but we are located, John Pamonte and I are located in our Chicago office right downtown. And we had the pleasure to be on the last December refunding issue in sort of this oversight capacity in terms of what we are looking at with your three-phase restructuring plan. On the next page, I just list out why use a municipal advisor, and that may be a question that you all are asking. And one of the things that I just want to go through is one of the bullet points, the second bullet point, that mentioned that for negotiated sales, the financial advisor's role, or municipal advisor, is to ensure that the issuer's goals and interests are represented and protected in structuring of the transaction and establishing of the borrowing rates and yields. That in a nutshell is what we do. As a municipal advisor, we have a fiduciary responsibility to the district. And with that responsibility, we are to look at what's in the best interest of the district. Because the Government Finance Officers Association states the use of a municipal advisor as a best practice, we like to always kind of refer to them. Municipalities and school districts and other entities have been using MAs for a number of years, but we do think that it's wise, and we also think that there's a lot of credibility behind it from the GFOA. On the next page, just in terms of Eller's scope of service or our scope of work, one of the things that was attached into your packet was what we call an issue disclosure, an MA issue disclosure, and it just lays out all of the pieces of what we do in terms of the authorization of a bond issue, the debt issuance process, and also post-issuance of the debt issue and any limitations that are in there. And I've just listed, I didn't list all of those on the PowerPoint, but I've just listed a couple of the key things in terms of what our role is as Ellers. One of the things we'll do is provide the information to assist the district with meeting the legal issuance requirements. In a couple of weeks, you guys will be looking at, or you have in your packets, a bond resolution, a parameters resolution that you will be voting on. One of our roles is to review that And again, when you have the review from us, when you have the review from the underwriter, as well as the district, we make sure that we're looking at all of the pieces that need to go into the bond issue. And again, it's a general responsibility of an MA to look at the legal issuance requirements. And we review and provide input on all of the various steps and actions that are required. It's kind of interesting because on one hand, it may sound a bit adversarial with the underwriter, but it's not. What it is though, if we find things, and you know, having worked with Raymond James or with Elizabeth on the last issue, you know, our role is very separate in that we are looking to make sure that we can verify all of the numbers that are provided. We can make sure that what you guys have expected, that's what you're finding out. So we have not had an issue with that in the past at all, but again, our role is to make sure that we double check the numbers, that we're verifying everything, we're verifying the documentation, and so forth. On page 5, excuse me, on page 5, just to keep a couple of key things on the debt issuance, one of the things that we'll do is that we will review, assist, and advise on most aspects of the debt issuance, from everything to the financing plan and the options that Elizabeth just laid out to you, but also everything that you would want us to in accordance with your directives. And in doing that, we help to assist in facilitating the process to make sure that according to the schedule that Elizabeth is going to go through, we make sure that we're helping that process along however we're needed by the financing team. One of the areas that we work in and that we'll be a part of is the rating agency evaluation or that rating review process. Making sure that we're a part of that presentation, making sure that the district is represented in the best light and in the most accurate light that we can. One of the other things that we do that's really key to our role as your municipal advisor is that we prepare an independent pricing analysis using comparable sales and or other benchmarks. And what we're doing is looking for when this 2017 issue sells, if you go with the option with the 2017 and the 2018, we make sure that when those sales happen, we look at what else is happening in the market. We compare it with various benchmarks that are around to see, well, did you get the kind of yields that you should have gotten? And we report on that and provide independent advisory on that. Now, remind you that Elizabeth will be doing the same thing, but ours is this oversight and a double check to ensure you that you have a municipal advisor that has a fiduciary responsibility to the district. Turning to page 6 really quickly, the other part of this process in terms of the debt, thank you, in terms of this process, one of the other things or one of the key things is that we assist with the sale and the day of sale activities as determined after we discuss it with the financing team. We also prepare what we call a sale day report to the district. And again, it's just a follow through of our independent analysis of this entire process. For post-issuance services, one of the things that we do is that prior to closing the Series 2017 and 2018 bonds, if you go with that option, is that we will help to coordinate the closing, including helping with the documentation development and making sure that the distribution as well as coordinating the transfer of funds as would be required. So all in all, you'll see that those, it may seem like there is some overlap, but again, our role is totally independent and totally in the best interest of the district. With that in mind, there are just a couple of limitations that I just want to point out. In the scope of services that you have in the issue disclosure in your packets, there are just a couple of things that we have as a limitation. Given that you have engaged Raymond James as a sole managing underwriter, we won't be evaluating other feasible financing options. So we won't come back to you and say, well, yeah, we saw the options that are provided, here's some others. We won't, because you guys have decided on the options that you're going with, and we don't dispute those at all. And then also, we have not been engaged to prepare the offering document for the bond issues. However, as a part of our responsibility, we will be reviewing and commenting on that document as well. So just all in all, we wanted to just let you know what we do, who we are as Ellers and as a municipal advisor. The last slide just shows some of the other services that we provide that are totally separate and apart from this transaction. And, wanted to just kind of let you know about our role. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is more for Liz. It has to do with the amount that the bond payment is going to go up. And I've seen the numbers from 300 to 800 in one instance, or from 300 to 480. And I just would like to have you verify that my thoughts about this are relatively right, because most of the time when we look at a house, we're talking about home ownership. And yeah, for many of us in this room, that's true, but for many others, they have rental. And people don't own the house. What they're doing is the landlord owns the property and passes it along to a typical tenant, so that the tenant is going next year to possibly see a rental rate in the rental increase of probably $25, $30 if it's just passed along. If the landlord is greedy, they may pass along a little more. On the other hand, if we look at $800 down the road, that's coming out as something that's going to be, what's that going to be, 5 years down, or
Yeah.
6, 7, 8 years down? That's going to come out to be that $800 is around, divide that by 12, $65, $70 per month of rental increase that our typical tenant is looking at. So just want to get the, am I right in thinking of it in those terms? And as far as how a typical tenant of a property might want to look at this, would they be better off thinking in terms of the long range? Because some people are only going to be in their apartment for 2 years. Should they think in terms of just getting it, I want to go for my 2 years and don't care what happens the rest of the way down? Or should it be taking a more long-term view because they're going to have to move to someplace else where the rent is ultimately going to be increased for them too?
Well, I think they should take more of a long-term view. I mean, I think that's just my view as well, whether they're going to buy a home later, whether they're going to move into another apartment building, but just for the value of the homes and the real estate in Dekalb. I know there's been a lot of focus on this increase from some of the realtors and some of the apartment owners, in a negative way, in a very challenging way, and feeling that that's a big challenge for their business model. So to the extent this flattening of the debt makes it more affordable for homeowners in Dekalb and property owners, not only apartment building owners that pass that property tax on to the renters, but for businesses, to the extent that is more of an even payment, then that might increase the values and whatnot here. It's really each an individual judgment call, but this increase has been noted for many years and expected for many years.
Part of our job as a board member is to sell the bond refinancing program that we choose to the people that live here. The people that live here are divided into various groups depending on whether they're homeowners or tenants.
Right.
And I think we've left the tenant out of our picture quite a bit, but I think that the tenant I just kind
So
of
you think
wonder,
the tenant has a shorter term?
the tenant rightly has a shorter term view. That's not their apartment. The value of it isn't increasing for them.
Right.
They have no equity in it.
Right. So I think that is a good issue for you as a board to consider. If having a shorter term view means, gosh, let's just take the bonds, refund them for savings and put them back in the same place as they are and not restructure and flatten and stretch out the payments like we've been talking about for these years. I mean, that is, I think, an issue for you all and for the FFAC. I mean, that is, I just think that the short-term view, whereas it needs to be considered, the longer-term view about the attractiveness of rentals and, homes in the city, if it's negatively affected by a perceived actual or perceived increase in the taxes are going to have to pay down the road, could be a negative deterrent to, people. What's your question, Jim?
Well, there was a question regarding any, there's really no, everything's self-explanatory in the sense of no fees or no hidden fees on any of these particular programs. As far as the long-term program, we're looking at it pretty straight up. It's just going to be a straight up restructuring, nothing else really attached to it beyond that restructuring,
That's
right?
correct.
So I guess the short question that I have is, one is whether we take a larger hit for a shorter period of time and then relieve ourselves of that bond.
Yeah.
And then go on, move along without the encumbrance, or whether we, spread the hit out over a period of time and look for some sort of, just flattening it out so that there's an expected amount of money that you're going to be paying over a longer period of time. So take the pill, get rid of it, or live with it for a longer period of time.
That is in fact the essence of the question too. I mean, if you look at your future financing plans, I think you got to think about that. Is there going to be a time when there's another referendum required? And if so, would you rather have your debt paid off, in 10 years? Or
That certainly is a consideration, given lifetime of properties, given lifetime of all sorts of different aspects of those properties as well.
I guess I'd like to just make a recommendation. Obviously, we have two options here. I think that this would be a good time to say, let's take this to the FFAC on the 14th and let them come back to us on the 19th, to the next board meeting with a recommendation that we can look at that. Cindy, do you have any thoughts on that?
No, I agree. I mean, because the FFAC has vetted this quite a bit for a long, long time. And they've looked at, these are just two options you're seeing tonight. They've looked at many options over the years and have looked at the option of, well, the do nothing option, which is, the room has the option, that's what we schedule as it is. And also looking at various different refinancing options as well and pushing out even farther than that. I mean, and this is really kind of a somewhat in the middle compromise, I guess you can say. So we're not pushing it out another 20 years. We're going to try and make that a little bit easier to swallow. So we're not paying all that interest over the life of this.
Am I understanding correctly that the first option is the do nothing option?
no, the first option, both of these options are
Do something.
do the restructure plan, because as Cindy mentioned, that's what we've been
Right.
kind of looking at, and here we're now ready to launch the second phase of the restructuring
Right.
plan. So both of them, it's one issue and two issues.
So really, the phase, the FFAC, after vetting all of this, has found that range from $5 to $6 million about as acceptable as we can make it. Otherwise, if we pushed it out further and flattened the tax rate even more, yes, we flatten, or maybe flatten or even lower the tax rate, but we're going to pay a lot more in interest if we push it out 15, 20 years. Or we have all the way back to the other option, to do nothing, bite the bullet for a short period of time or shorter period of time, and then just have it fall off altogether. So the FFAC is going to have to bring a recommendation.
I was going to ask you, could they give us pros and cons of both scenarios?
I
as well
think
as a
they're great.
recommendation?
I mean, they have like Cindy said, they've. been
And
looking
they looked at,
this
for sure, yeah. So if that's not too,
Yeah, I just think that would be helpful in making this decision.
Right.
To have
I know there's factors, good, on
both sides.
both ways.
Right.
Well, what community members are involved in that FFAC, if you mind? I mean, because if we don't necessarily have input from people that, I mean, I'm not saying that you don't, I'm not validating, but from community members that also are wanting the tax burden to be, gone.
Right.
What have we done to engage the community and pretty much ensure that we have representatives at FFAC that overall will look at the situation from every community member? Because Howard brings up a valid point, we have to consider the renters as well. And we can't just neglect some community members. We have to ensure that we are fair overall. So what have we done to invite people that are,
Well, anybody, it's an open meeting.
okay, so can they engage? So if, obviously, the board works differently, we can't just have people asking questions during the discussion. The community members, are they allowed to just ask questions during FFAC and their input be validated?
Yeah, I mean, if community members show up, yeah, absolutely, because it is a more of it's a public meeting, it gets posted, and, there's a couple board members on it, we've got a couple of realtors, we've got bankers, we've just got your general community members, so there's a really good cross-section.
Yeah, there is. I've been on committee for a while, and, the thing is that I would just say if the community member wanted to come also encourage them to do their research a little bit, so that they're prepared. Ask the questions that you want to ask. And so, but I mean, just like I said today, tonight for this meeting, the more the community gets involved, the less surprises, the better off we'll be, the more transparency. They'll be able to see what the heck's going on. And there's more to this district than just, are we gonna do an investigation on who lives here or not? There's a lot of other things that the community needs to be involved in. And so that is a great
And I
effort.
understand that, that's why.
This kind of,
You're right.
this kind of perspective, when you bring this kind of perspective, and thank you so much, it really is helpful. I mean, it's very helpful to have a different kind of point of view and bring a different kind of perspective to a discussion. So I've been at the FFAC meeting and I've spoken up there. It's really a very friendly environment for doing that. As long as you're asking questions that are pertinent, you're bringing some kind of contributing to the discussion. It's really a very helpful part of it. So.
And I think it's a core group of people that have been on there for a while, but then we've also had new members as well. So you have those people that have been here and understand this because they've seen it quite a bit and have a good understanding of the goal. And then you have people that as well are new and bring a different perspective as well. So it really is a great area to vet, especially on this type of process.
So do we then send it back to FFAC with any kind of, I mean, this is a clarified presentation tonight, so that would be then going in front of the FFAC.
Yeah, they'll be there.
Yeah, because it'll be presented basically verbatim what you're looking at here, and then the plan is to look at the parameters resolution at the next board meeting for consideration. So in that parameters resolution, I don't know if you want to talk to what that technically does, that would probably be a good idea.
Sure, yeah. So, September 14th is the FFAC committee meeting. And then they are going to look at these two options, plus the information, ask the questions, propose the questions that you brought up about the renters. If they, in fact, do have a short-term view on that, and what they think we should evaluate, make a recommendation. That will be reflected in the parameters bond resolution that will be put forward in your board packets for the September 19th meeting. That's the legal document that authorizes you to go ahead and refund the bonds in one or two issues. We hope FFAC will also make the recommendation for, for one of the two issues, depending on, that's really a market decision. It's an interest cost decision, depending on what's going on in the market. So that will be optional within the parameters resolution, but the recommendation from FFAC will be able to be actualized through that resolution. That's a legal action, the last legal action the board will have to take on that first October 2017 refund. Okay. So it approves the issuance of that refunding bond with the structure agreed upon. within certain parameters. So I'll have a maximum interest rate, a maximum cap, and a maximum tax levy. So it will give the board a very clear idea. And then within that parameters resolution, the final authority to approve the bond issue will be delegated to the board president and the director, city. So when we go to actually sell the bonds, what we're projecting to do, once we get the bond rating around the week of October 2nd, the board president and the director of finance and operations will give their final sign off. Once they've reviewed everything and make sure it fits within the parameters presented to the board, then that issue will close around the 1st of November.
I firmly believe in Ayler's function here as an oversight. I mean, it may seem to some, like, well, why? We've got the expert, why? But as we've all seen, you name it, government entity, you need a little bit of oversight. And so I think it's important to point out that, the work that Ayler does is a very, I think it's a great method.
Yes.
And that was something that also was vetted quite a lot by FFAC, that function as well. Because back 10 years ago, that, before the Frank Dodd Act, that wasn't really up, as a big issue, that oversight. But now that is with the SEC, and they don't require it, but they highly recommend it. So I think it's a great tool in conjunction.
I think it also, using that kind of procedure, helps us, ensures us a higher bond rating. I mean, the procedures, what we do, how we do it, they all keep us up, and that bond rating keeps our rate down low. So I think that all that kind of comes back to us in a very long term, but also in short term, it comes back, money comes back to us, whatever involved here, comes back to us every time in the bond rating.
So do we have a consensus? We'll go to the FFAC with it and come back with a recommendation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It was very, very helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we have D428 student performance data snapshot, and this is Dr. Amy Buckner. This is an informational item.
Good evening. For those of you I don't know, my name is Amy Luckner. I'm the Assessment, Research, and MTSS Coordinator for the district. And I'm here tonight to share with you an overview of our student performance data from 2016 and 2017. So I'll go on the next slide here. When we think about student performance, there's of course a number of different ways you could measure this. Tonight what we're going to talk about are the educational attainment data, which we measure by graduation rate. And then also some of our indicators of academic skills. So we have our district assessments, which include our Ames-Webb benchmarking measures, as well as math measures of academic progress. And then we have our state assessments, which, as you know, include PART for grades 3 through 8. And then last year, for the first time, we had the SAT for our 11th graders. Then we do have the Illinois Science Assessment. Those scores are not yet available from the state. And then some of our students do take advanced placement exams as well, so I'll share with you some of that information as well. So the first indicator we're going to look at is graduation rate. So what percent of our students graduate in 4 years? And so our data, as polled kind of at the very end of August, indicate that 84.15% of our students graduate within 4 years. That is very similar to our rate last year, which was 84.16%. Just for a point of reference, the state data for this year is not yet available, but for 2016 was 85.5%, and for 2015 was 85.6%. So that's where the state is at overall. So for the academic skills data, I've put together kind of the reading data first, and then we'll talk about the math data second. So to begin the reading data discussion, we'll take a look at our early literacy indicators. So these are for our kinders. When you look at these graphs for the Ames-Webb data, the green bars at the bottom, those reflect the percent of students who are demonstrating established level of skills at that time. What that means is that they are at the 50th percentile or higher according to the Ames Web national data. The yellow bar indicates the percent of students, thank you, who are demonstrating emerging skills. And so they are between the 25th and the 50th percentile according to the national Ames Web data. And then the red bar represents students who are below the 25th percentile according to kind of where the students are nationally. For early literacy, what we have, there are two different indicators that we look at. LNF is letter naming fluency. Some of you I know are very familiar with this and have actually administered it as well. Letter naming fluency is just the ability to name the letter. And then we have letter sound fluency, which is the ability to say the sound the letter makes. And what you can see across here, the first section we have is 2015-2016, and then the next section is 2016-2017. That from fall to spring each year, for our kindergartners, the percent of students who are meeting that benchmark has increased in both of those areas. So we see our kindergartens are growing quite a bit across the year. The one thing to keep in mind, though, when you think about these benchmarks is the benchmark itself goes up. Right? So what you need, the number of letters that you need to be able to name or sound across the year also grows. So to stay at the benchmark level, you have to increase your skills as well. So this map is a little bit, this graph is a little bit busier, understatement. So what we have here, it's the same kind of information. This is our reading fluency measure. Reading fluency is just a way to screen kind of general reading skills. And we have kind of, we do that for our 1st through 5th graders. So they have that information here. Again, just to reiterate, the green bar again would indicate students who have established skills 50th percentile or above. Yellow bar is emerging skills between 25th and 50th percentile. Red bar would be students who are below the 25th percentile on those national benchmarks. So I have 2 years of information here so we can kind of look at patterns. The first 2 bars in any grade level are 2015, 2016. The second 2 bars are last year. And so the kind of, generally what I'm looking here is to provide kind of a global overview. You know, how are students doing overall? So one of the kind of patterns you can look at is kind of the percent of students in the green or with emerging skills. And we kind of see here from last year, which are the second 2 bars, in 1st grade, in 2nd grade, and in 5th grade especially, we saw an increase in the percent of students who had established skills. And then we saw very much the same percent in 3rd grade and just a slight decrease in 4th grade. So that represents students are maintaining or are continuing to grow to be at that level in those grades as well.
Sure. So, I mean, I know that Ames Web reading obviously just tests for fluency.
Mm-hmm.
But what are you guys using for comprehension? I mean, I know research states there's correlation, right? Fluency affects their reading, their literacy skills. But I mean, fluency isn't the overall. Right. And I often find that, and this is what I truly believe, that Ames Web is actually a useful tool, but I believe it's often overseen as a total RTI solution.
So part of what so you're right that the reading fluency is used very often because it's a very reliable measure to give, and it does correlate very highly with reading comprehension and can give it very quickly. So what the challenge is that they're running into with general screeners like this is a reading comprehension. They have a hard time getting a measure that can assess true reading comprehension. And so the measures that they have developed, like the maze, where you can you try to find a word that fits in a sentence, actually show lower reliability and tend to measure more a student's ability to pick up the context cues right next to the word and do that rather than kind of reading comprehension. So one of the reasons we added MAP for a couple years ago was to get that better picture of overall reading abilities for our 2nd through 5th graders. And then also our data teams look at NSGRA data, which is Next Steps Guided Reading Assessment. So that's an individual assessment that teachers give their students. We use that grades K through 5 to get a sense of their overall reading level that includes both a fluency component and a comprehension component. So to really get an accurate sense of comprehension, you need more than 3 minutes, which is what this takes, right? So you need kind of more in-depth assessments as well. So it's maybe more information than you wanted, but what also is,
I do want to.
yeah, I'm happy to provide that. So what also is interesting is that this is Ames Web 1.0, the first version. And it is in its twilight years, for lack of a better word. So we are investigating our next step with that. So this is our last year with Ames Web 1.0. And so Ames Web, yes, it's a time to move on for multiple reasons. Technology being one of it. Yeah, yes. So Ames Web Plus and FastBridge are the kind of two ones that a lot of school districts are moving to. And both of those have some other indicators of reading comprehension that they've been working on. So one difference is price. So we're looking at that. Otherwise, they're pretty similar. So we've been comparing, kind of making sure that what measures do they have in terms of use. Ames Web Plus has developed a silent reading measure that a lot of people are excited about because this is oral reading fluency, and when you get up into 5th grade, that may not be the best reflection of a student's reading skills. A lot of them are reading silently by that point. They also have developed a couple other comprehension measures that they're excited about. They actually discontinued Maze because of the problems they had.
Now, is Ames Web Plus aligned with Common Core?
They, that's an excellent question. They would say yes, but I guess I would question that, yeah. And so I think that's definitely part of the consideration that we have. But in general, their goal is to really provide a screener, like quick and dirty, taking a temperature. How are these kids doing? But this is only one piece of information, and so we would never want to make an important decision about students with just one piece of information.
That's why we have map data that we're also going to show here.
Yeah, and in the data tuning process, even when we're talking tier 2, tier 3 decisions, like who needs more intervention, we consider multiple pieces of information for that purpose. But anyway, so that's kind of what we're just starting that investigation, and we'll be looking into that this year. So you'll be hearing more about that as well. We do have then for our students in the bilingual program, this is the reading fluency for Spanish measures. And so, excuse me, we can see then for 1st, 2nd, and 5th grade a pretty significant increase in the number of students who are reading fluently. And then slight increase in 2nd grade and a slight decrease in 4th grade. So MAP is another indicator that we have in our district. Again, we're just starting our 3rd year with MAP. But this tool was adopted to provide some more detailed information about how our students are doing, both in reading and math. Math we've used for 2nd grade through 8th grade, and then in our 9th grade, we do it kind of by course. So we have our humanities students taking humanities, and then students taking algebra take the math assessment. Math really focuses on growth, how our students growing across the year, and it provides detailed information that can be leveraged to really inform our classroom instruction, as well as differentiation, how do we differentiate for students, and as well as helping us determine students that need additional support. The triangle there, the diamond, represents the amount of expected growth according to MAP. They calculate that by looking at where students start, like what's their starting level, as well as their grade level, the content area, and then the number of weeks of instruction between the fall, in this case, spring assessments. So the overall pattern that I would direct you to is that our students are growing. All of the blue bars going up are growth, but we would like them to grow more. So we're really working a lot of initiatives to boost that growth up so they can continue to grow and meet those goals. We now are moving on to our state assessments. These state data, just as a quick heads up, the state data for 2017 are preliminary, but I don't anticipate they would change very much. So in this case, the little squares are the state level, And then the blue bars are our percentages from last year and this year. Overall for Park, we see a pattern where the percent of students that met or exceeded expectations decreased this year for us. And so we see that kind of across the board, except for 7th grade, it stayed the same. And actually, 6th grade, that went up. Let's not forget the 6th graders. And then we have our SAT data. Again, this is for ELA, for our juniors. So this year, all juniors took the SAT as a state mandated test. Here we have again, the square is the benchmark. In this case, it's the college and career readiness benchmark determined by College Board, who does SAT. And the orange bars are the kind of the mean scores for the average scores for our students in that graph on the left. I do want to remind you that this reflects an average, so we had a whole range of scores. Like on the SAT, I believe our highest score was in the 1500s. So, you know, we have a full range of scores that this represents, but this is the average score here. We did take, let me step back, we did take the PSAT. Our 9th graders and 10th graders took the PSAT as well. So the scores you see there are the PSAT scores for the 9th graders, and then the PSAT scores for the 10th graders. So you see the bar kind of moves up, and then the scores for our juniors, the SAT. The gray bar is the state scores, average score.
Excuse me for
Sure.
maybe a very simple question, but does SAT implies they're moving along to something where the SAT is needed? Do all our students have to take the pre-SAT?
So the PSAT, yes, so all the students in attendance took the PSAT, the 9th graders and 10th graders.
How about the SAT?
The SAT is state mandated. So they're using that as, they used to use the ACT, and then they switched to the SAT, that's a state mandated test.
Right.
So they track who takes that, and you have to have this 95% of your
So that's really a performance test rather than a access to something else. I mean, it's really just a test of performance, right?
It is. What's nice about it, the shifts, so in between ACT and SAT, they had a brief period of time where they had PARCC as a state mandated test for high school, and PARCC had really no value for our high school students. And so now for SAT, it provides us an opportunity to provide an assessment for free for our students to get them to school if that's what they're choosing to do. So at least the test that they're using for the state mandate is something that also has the use for students.
Right.
So it provides kind of multiple purposes.
So for students who are college-bound students, then the SAT is, it is a valuable assessment.
It's a structural, it's an evaluator so that when they move into school, that they can get into certain schools by SAT performance or not.
Yes,
Exactly.
for the schools that actually use the score, I will say.
Right.
Because some schools, it's on a sliding scale, the score is irrelevant if you have a GPA that's at a certain rate.
Right.
That's for another discussion.
Right. So it's really an evaluator of performance to a certain extent, in this case, certainly, right?
So in this case, we're seeing the SAT has been recently redesigned, so they have aligned this with the Common Core State Standards, and this is a representation of the English reading and writing skills that the students are demonstrating on the exam, aligned to the standards. On the right-hand side, one thing I want to point out to you, this is the percent of students who met the benchmark for ELA. For our SAT, 60% of our students met the ELA, which in this case is called ERW benchmark. I think that's fantastic. So that's the same as, that's the state average as well, that 60% of students across the state are meeting the ERW benchmark in SAT, which means that they are, according to SAT, college and career ready. The way SAT defines that is that there's a 75% chance that they will get a C or higher on their fall, course in that same content if they were to go to college. So we have some more information from math. I'm going to kind of go through this quickly. Please stop me if you have any questions. I know we've been sitting here for a while. For our math data for early numeracy, we have number identification, being able to say the number, and quantity discrimination, which is being able to tell which number is larger. And so the pattern we see here is that from fall to spring, our kindergartners increased in their number identification. but decreased in their quantity discrimination. This is math computation. Again, it's simply an assessment of computational skills in math. It does not assess the reasoning as part of it. And we see kind of, again, some variability across the grades. Strong increases in 5th and 4th grade and 1st grade, and about the same, slight decrease in 2nd and 3rd grade. And then here are our math data. So the math data, this is the amount of growth that students made in their math skills. This does cover a broader definition of math skills, including computation as well as reasoning. So this is a more comprehensive measure. And we see here kind of in 6th and 7th grades, on average, students are meeting the projected growth. In other areas, students are growing, but we are excited to continue to support them to grow even more in those areas.
I have a question about math, but it's more about it with literacy, more than math itself. Though I understand that there's no perfect assessment, and I'm by no means saying that, you know, I dislike everything about math itself. But I do genuinely believe, especially when I attended curriculum council and you presented a little bit of information about math itself for our bilingual students or ELL. So what are we doing? I mean, what are we doing in terms of that? Because we know that the instruction for areas are taught in one language, certainly others are taught in another. So what are we doing? Because we also understand that that's not necessarily reflective of their academic skills, but rather their language deficiency.
Right. So the math, we do have the math map available in Spanish. So for our bilingual students who, again, that's right now just a Spanish speaking program, they take the math in Spanish. They have that, Amy, we just changed it this year, is which one they take is based on allocation. So in terms of language allocation in the classroom, so I believe right now 2nd, 3rd, and 4th take it in Spanish because the way the allocation has been distributed for the math content of that portion primarily is given in Spanish.
Okay, so it is aligned with the language that the content is taught.
It's still not great because the reality is what would be is that they would have an option where they could, for any particular question in math or any assessment, they could choose English or Spanish or English or any native language. Here we have to choose a priori or beforehand and decide, okay, you're taking it in this language or this. You can't change in the middle. And so that's the kind of unfortunate part because some of our students, even though they're learning in Spanish, right, might be able to say it better or to respond better in English. I think it's difficult to say that it's difficult to limit them to one language or another, but we do it by language allocation. For our students who are ESL, native speakers in another language, they take, if they're new to the country, they don't take the map reading because it's not, it's all in English, right? So that's not a useful indicator of their skills, they're still learning English. If they are not new to the country, they do take the map English or map reading as an indicator of their reading skills in English, and the map math can be verbally translated by one of our homeschool liaisons who speak that language, so they can translate the question. So that's kind of our approach right now.
Valerie, you bring up a point that Dr. Huber and I were discussing earlier today, that in this day and age, with all the technology that we have available, why is it that students can't take any assessment, SAT, ACT, any of these in their preferred language, and be able to hopscotch back and forth, as Amy was alluding to? Because what we want to do is assess students with what they know and are able to do, instead of what they know and are able to do in a specific language. So right now, it's English. So it's that's everybody's data, not only Dekalb. Everybody's data is skewed for that reason. I'm sorry, Amy.
Thank you. And then we have our PARCC data for math. We see again, across the board, that the percent of our students who met or exceeded expectations decreased from 2016 to 2017 with the exception of fourth grade. And then we have our PSAT and SAT data for math. Again, that square is the benchmark. And on the left-hand side, you see kind of the average score. For SAT, we're slightly below the average score for the state. In terms of percent of students who met the benchmark, we had 33 or 32% met the benchmark in SAT versus 39% in the state. So we're below but pretty close to the state average for math. This is the overall SAT scores. I thought you might be interested since I know SAT is a more familiar assessment, just in terms of the average score that we have for SAT and the state, as well as the percent of students who met both benchmarks on the assessment. Then we have our AP exams. So we have several classes AP classes that we offer. Those are the list of the classes we offer. The classes that are starred are classes in which at least one student took the related AP exam in 2017. And then this is the percent of students who took the exam who received a score of 3 or above. The reason that
the last graph.
oh sure. Yeah.
So larger than half, it looks like to me. I mean, it's considerably larger. We only have a couple in which they didn't, right? This
Correct.
is taking the exam, and upon completion of the course, taking the exam.
Right. Now within that, in these courses, again, it's at least one student took the exam. So not all students who were, even if it's starred, not all students who were enrolled took the exam.
Why not?
Yeah, I can. All right. So if I could chime in. So if you look, so for example, music theory,
right.
You typically keep in mind that the driving force for many of the students taking this is to receive college credit.
Mm-hmm.
Music programs tend to be specific and tend not to waive classes. So if you were to take, I don't know, the AP Calc exam, the entrance level Calc class that business majors would have to take would be waived. So there's there's that carrot there for the students. Mm-hmm. Students going to the music theory, the program's usually canned for them. And that's why you'll see the same thing with the art. Many of the classes are classes for either general electives or where they're going to be taking multiple classes to get the credit at a four-year university.
Right. Thank you very much.
And then the reason that the 3 is usually used as a kind of a benchmark is that typically a score of 3 or higher is needed to get that college credit. And so the kind of dark blue or purple bar is us, Dekalb. So this past year, 77% of our students who took the exam got 3 or higher. And then across the state, 66% achieved a 3 or higher. And then global is all students who took AP exams where they were offered. And that's 60% or higher. So of our students who took the exam, 77% or higher got 3 or higher. So what's really important about this, so this is a lot of data, but data is not meaningful unless you use it to inform your instruction or to inform your practice. It's information. And so with this information, how do we leverage it to help our students? When it comes down to it, that's the most important part. We continue to work on, we continue to dig deeper into the data, to do kind of data analysis as well as really support our data-based decision-making in our data teams. So our buildings have data teams in which they look at these data for their building and make decisions both for tier 1 or general classroom instruction as well as the intervention supports that students are getting. They also then take it a step a little bit broader and look at the data from kind of a secondary perspective and an elementary perspective in our leadership meetings. And then we look at the district data at district rising star meetings as well to kind of really think about what does the data say about how we're doing and how does that inform our priorities as a district. And then also we continue to support our best practices, our best instructional practices, including our curriculum tech initiative, so that we can continue to reach our students and then continue to monitor how students are doing to see what we're doing is working, and moving forward with that. So that's kind of in a nutshell, some more numbers that we have, in this case about student data. I appreciate all the questions, but are there any other questions at all that I can help you answer?
Thank you so
You're welcome.
much.
Thank you for hanging in there with me. And I will look forward to sending more data again.
Thank you.
Oh, actually, I'm sorry. So sorry. Can I say one more thing? I'm so sorry. I wanted to talk a little bit about ACT. I brought it with me and everything. So not all of our students take ACT. It's optional. It's on their own. But we did have 228 students take ACT last year. So I wanted to let you know, again, it's self-selected. Our average score was 22.4, which is an increase from last year, which was 20.5. So the students who elected to take it, the average score went up. So that was
Substantial increase.
yes.
Well, Jeff, again, this is the difference between, in the state of Illinois, when we go back to SAT, every junior is required to take it, or at least have 95% participation rate. In that particular year, it was self-selected students. It was not a requirement.
On the ACT.
Yes.
Right, again.
So,
Well, essentially, about half of our students still took it,
yes,
which is kind of a big number. So.
and, you know, that's still a very strong score, and again, above the state
10%
average.
rise.
Yeah.
That's a substantial amount.
Right. And that's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have non-business consent agenda. This is an action item that the Board of Education approve the non-business consent agenda items A through J.
Second.
Any discussion? All right, roll call, please.
Valerie Pena Hernandez.
Yes.
Rick Smith.
Yes.
Howard Solomon.
Yes.
Jeff Albrecht.
Yes.
Victoria Newport.
Yes. And next is business and finance, and this is approval of purchase order requisition. This is an action item
Sorry.
that the Board of Education approve the purchase order requisition list as attached.
Second.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Rick Smith.
Yes.
Howard Solomon.
Yes.
Jeff Albrecht.
Yes.
Victoria Newport.
Yes.
Valerie Pena Hernandez.
Next is new business and administration, certified nursing substitute contract, and this is an action item. That the Board of Education approve the contract with a retired certified school nurse to cover a long-term FMLA at Dekalb High School and Brooks Elementary School from the start of the 2017-18 school year through mid-November. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Howard Solomon.
Yes.
Jeff Albrecht.
Yes.
Victoria Newport.
Yes.
Valerie Pena Hernandez.
Yes.
Rick Smith.
Yes.
Next, we have ESS Title I, D428 plan for grades K through 8. And this is a information, discussion, and action item. So that the Board of Education approve the proposed Title I plan for D428 grades K through 8. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
So, Vicki, Kim, and I want to give you just a very brief overview of the Title I plan that we are wanting to submit to the state of Illinois tomorrow, actually. And I just want to give you a little bit of background information. ESSA, which we are referring to Every Student Will Succeed Act, really is born from the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965. And the whole point of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act was really about how we could support our students that were coming from those low-income families. Prior to that, there had been no support really directed to those students. And so that act went into effect in 1965. And then in 2002, Bush signed into law the No Child Left Behind Act, which again was meant to support not just our low-income students, but students as a whole. But it was also taking a more holistic approach wanting to make sure we were providing a safe learning environment for our students and that we had those highly qualified teachers in our classrooms. So we are just coming out of No Child Left Behind and are coming into the Every Student Will Succeed Act. And that was put into law. Obama signed it in 2015. It's taken a couple of years for really the state and the federal government to figure out what that's going to look like. And to be honest, last week, August 30th, the federal government gave Illinois the okay on their Title I plan that they had submitted. And hence we are coming to you now. And so one of the things that is really, I think, encouraging from that educator perspective about ESSA is that for the state of Illinois, we really are, NCLB opened that door a little bit, but as far as the C&I team is concerned, it's really opening that door much wider in terms of really looking at the whole child. It's not just about academics anymore, it's about that social emotional piece and how we can best support our students to be college and career ready. So these are the goals that have been laid forth by the Every Student Shall Succeed Act. And they are saying by 2032 that all kindergartners are assessed for readiness. And then 90% or more of our third graders are reading at or above grade level. 90% or more of our fifth graders are performing meeting or exceeding expectations in mathematics. That we have 90% or more of our ninth graders on track to graduate with their cohort, so they will graduate high school in 4 years. 90% or more of our students are college and career ready when they graduate. And all students have highly effective teachers in the classroom, and every school is providing that safe and healthy learning environment for all of its students. So those are the goals that ESSA has set forth for us as we move forward with Title I.
I have a question for you. So 90% of the students are, a number of different things are 90%.
Yes.
We're at 84% graduation, 82% graduation. Does that then raise the bar for our graduation bar to go up to 90? Is that correct? Am I seeing that? So we have a job of work to do. And that's over what kind of period of time?
2032, so 16 years.
Yeah, wow.
Now, here's what they're not defining for 90% or more of students who graduate from high school ready for college and career. That doesn't necessarily mean just the data that we just saw, that it's based on a standalone SAT or ACT score. There's a study out, in fact, it's laying on my desk, been looking at it for a year, that there's various indicators on what college readiness is. For instance, a student who takes and passes an AP class with a B or better, regardless of if they've taken the test, that's an indicator of college readiness. If they take a dual enrollment class, we have dual enrollment classes with Kishwaukee College, and have a B or better, that's an indicator of college readiness. And then there's other indicators, and then there's career readiness standards. And so we're starting to look at the kids, looking at our kids as entire kids instead of just can they perform one day on an assessment. So we can come back and present, I'll share that information with all the board because it's a really interesting read that's being pressed forward. So it's not just about one day sitting on it for an ACT, SAT. There's other ways to demonstrate readiness. And also I mentioned the sliding scale that colleges use. Now there are some colleges and some specific programs within colleges that are highly competitive, and an ACT, SAT really makes or breaks a student being accepted. And then there are, depending on what university you're going to, if you have a 3.8 and you've taken an an AP class, you've taken maybe a dual enrollment course, and you've demonstrated college readiness, then the ACT, SAT score isn't near as relevant anymore for that student. So colleges are already starting to look at this. Some colleges are getting rid of an ACT, SAT altogether. And they're just looking at what did the student take while they were in high school and how did they perform? That's what they want to know. And what other activities were they involved in? Were they well-rounded kids? So I'll get that study to you. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's all right. So, those are the goals that have been set for us. And again, I just want to reiterate what Jamie said. It's not just about the academics. There is so much more to that in terms of making sure that we have that supportive, nurturing learning environment for all of our students. So Kim is going to talk a little bit about what it looks like at the elementary level.
And some of this I think I've talked about last.
Can I get something in before we? As we look at this, there's a couple of items in the last thing. If you go back one slide, the last two items on there don't seem to relate necessarily directly to the students as the outcome. All students are supported by highly prepared and effective teachers and school leaders. How are you going to tell that? What does that mean, highly qualified? And is this just like for the public schools, or does this also apply to the many charter schools that are starting to come online, finding their teaching staff from out of AmeriCorps, bringing in more, 60-75% of staff with no training, no licensure, and just saying go? Who actually is this supposed to deal with? I know the publics are probably going to take this goal seriously. I'm wondering about some of the other folks in the world. Are we going to be able to claim this as an advantage when we do it right?
And your second part is the healthy learning environment for all students, safe and healthy learning environment. The measure of that seems really kind of obscure. I mean, it would seem that how would they measure that particular thing? Do they go into detail about how they're going to measure those things?
They have not gone into a lot of detail on that, and that again is one of the things that I like about this, is because it's allowing the local educational agency to put together the plan that is best going to meet the students that we are serving, rather than that more global one size fits all kind of thing. So it really does leave the onus on us. Jamie, did you want to?
Well, the state has taken steps in that direction when they introduced the 5 Essentials survey, which is an assessment that we have to give every 2 years to all of our students, not all of our students. How is it 5th grade up? I'm sorry?
Secondary.
Just 6th through up. And part of that survey is just this. They're asking students, a series of questions about the safety of their schools, whether or not their teachers truly care about their work and truly value them as students. And the 5 Essential survey came out of Chicago Club Schools, and they've been using this survey for a long time. So they have longitudinal data to go back and look at to compare to.
Is that an anonymous survey? I mean, is that a?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, so all we get is the compiled data.
Right.
But they're also comparing like school districts to like school districts, not demographically, regionally. So, I mean, we are getting feedback, as well as the state board, to look at it and say, do the kids and the parents and the teachers who live, work, and live in these environments, do they see this as a safe and healthy learning environment based off of the input from the students, from the teachers?
And we've been doing that for a couple of years?
Yes.
Yes.
I'd like to see the data.
It's on our school report card, but we certainly guide you to that.
Yeah. Thank you.
So elementary, I gave a picture of this last year when I went over our Title I plan, and this new Title I plan, we're leaning towards similar things. Our part of the plan talks about having reading specialists and literacy assistants, which we have in every building, to help support our students that are at risk. Also, intervention and instructional materials, when we were talking earlier, our kids have changed drastically over the last several years. We need materials that meet their needs now. The materials we might have used even 6 years ago, are not the materials that we need to be using with our students now. So we spent a lot of time piloting last year. Now we're dedicating some dollars towards getting those interventions in place. Instructional coaches provide a lot of PD during the day. It's embedded during the day when they meet with teachers as well as after school. The application also supports data teams. For elementary, we have data teams 4 times a year. And that pays for those teachers to be able to get together for a half a day and look through the data and make plans and collaborate about what we're going to do to help our students. Summer Academy, which is offered in the summer, is also another big piece of that. That's a K-4 program. And then now it's nice that we're getting into the social emotional pieces, and we've done some book studies over the last year and going to go into this year with groups of teachers in the district on how to support our students.
In secondary, it's going to look very different. Historically in this district, Title I funds strictly were designated for K-5 up until this year. And as you noticed, when we looked at the earlier slide, it said school-wide. Under Title I, school-wide allows districts to really do much more broad-based support. The amount of dollars are designated by the level of low income within the district, but under school-wide, it's for everybody within those designated buildings. Up until this year, though, secondary grades 6 through 12 had no access to Title I funds. So the goal was going into this year being the first year. Title I does mandate this your first year, you're what we call targeted. Targeted just means that during this year, what title funds that will get designated for secondary will be targeted for those students who are most at risk academically. Again, the amount of funds are designated based on income, but the actual focus of those funds when you're targeted means you're very intentionally targeting it towards a specific group of students and a specific program. So going into this year, the decision was we would focus on middle school only, since this is our first step going into expanding Title I into secondary. To do that, and there are specific steps that Title I gives you in terms of when a district or a part of a district, in this case, desires to take that initial first step to become targeted. Probably the biggest piece is a comprehensive needs assessment. So that is something that was conducted in the late fall, early winter of last year. There were 4 surveys that were conducted. It included the building, this is all at middle school, just building principals and their leadership teams, teachers, and then also parents up in the community whose students attended the 2 middle schools. Looking at all that data, it was determined that math was the area of focus. We have a comprehensive reading assistance program at the middle school, but we had nothing in place to support math. So once we identified that area, then in early spring, formed a Title I math team. This is a group of teachers from the middle school, a mixture of both classroom teachers, special ed, myself, building administrators, and starting in March, we started to look at the math data, because remember, this has to be targeted, and started to get a handle in terms of the group of students going into this fall that we would want to support and target in this math support, and really better identify those students most at risk. So that team formed, and we met in the spring. We also met through the summer with the newest math data that we will get at the end of this month, because math benchmarking just started today at the middle school. We'll further identify that group of students that we wish to support going through this school year. The same math team is also in the process of vetting out possible intervention programs to purchase and to pilot. Again, we are just in that targeted stage. And so we're looking at, within the structure of the middle school day, how can we best support these students within the time that we have given. So this team has been vetting out and thinking in terms of some possible program interventions that we could purchase. But probably, I'll be honest with you, the part that I'm most excited about, this team, we've been doing a pretty in-depth book study, and we're getting ready to do another one. In addition, we're going to be doing some site visits and really begin to identify some math practices to support classroom teachers and students within the math block. Because we're realistic and know that within the middle school day, there's just so much we can do outside of the classroom, but there's so much more that we might be able to be doing within the classroom. So there's some really dynamic things. We're in the very, very early stages, but I think if that group of teachers were here, they would tell you that the possibilities of just this initial step in terms of targeted is going to open up some possibilities and most important, offer some support to our struggling students.
So our timeline is anticipated board approval tonight, submitting it hopefully tomorrow. The readers of the plan, we would like to have it approved. We are hopeful that it would be approved by September 30th, because they will not release any Title I funds until the plan is approved. And so, you know, we are dependent upon that approximately $1.4 million to be able to provide those services school-wide in our elementary buildings, and then with that targeted piece at the middle school. So that's our timeline moving forward. Questions? Any questions?
I just want to say thank you for getting this put together as quickly as you did, because I know it's a lot of work. And thank you for getting it done in a short time period.
Well, I just noticed it was anticipated BOE approval. Are we supposed to vote on this?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, just making sure.
I just wanted to just make sure nobody has a question. All right, well then, however, like roll call.
Dekalb,
Yes,
Victoria Newport.
Yes.
Valentina Hernandez.
thank you, ladies.
Okay. Yes, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Rick Smith,
Yes.
Howard Solomon.
Yes.
Next, we have recommended revisions to Board of Education policies, and this is a first reading. It's an informational item that the Board of Education will hold a first reading of recommended revisions from the Illinois Association of School Boards to Board of Education policies as attached. Any discussion?
No, I was just going to mention that as part of the board packet, and this is what I've always done with the Press Plus, just did a quick review with a recommendation. There's the first one, the closed minutes. I don't know if you had a chance to look this over. It's really a recommended form. I know we already have a form, so I would like you to glance at it and we'll take your recommendation. I'll send that. Melissa, can you remind me to send Howard that form tomorrow? And then there's, it's almost identical to what we use. I will be okay with it. And then there was another one, Board Policy 7:275, orders to forego life-sustaining treatment. I asked our legal for them to review this. They did not get back to me with any additional recommendations other than what I have in here. So you might want to make sure you look at it over the next quarter.
Thank you.
Jamie, thank you for putting the policies and changes in this form. It makes it really easier to look at them and be able to go back to the current policy. So thank you. Okay, any other questions? Do we have a consensus then to bring this back to the next board meeting?
Yes.
Okay, and then with that, the meeting will be adjourned. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All against?